This is always a challenging model for my students, so why don't we go through it? We like to call this guy Smiley. We are looking down into the bottom of his cranium here, and we are looking at, these are in white here, are cranial nerves. We have the falx here in white, and then in blue we have the sinuses. So first let's take a look at the sinuses. The sinuses are just veins. These are the veins that drain the blood out of the brain, and let me go back to the sinuses here. So the sinuses that you're looking at here, the most superior of the sinuses, so the uppermost vein that's draining blood off of the brain, is the superior sagittal sinus. And it's actually a lot easier to see if you were to see a sagittal section of the head, which we also have in the lab, and you'll see it running across the top of the brain. And it's usually blue because veins are usually colored in blue on models because it's deoxygenated blood returning back to the heart. So this is just the bottom part of the superior sagittal sinus here. And so it's running down off the top of the brain and the blood is coming down and it hits this transverse sinus. So again, the sinuses are in blue because they're representing veins. They are veins. And so this is the transverse sinus. It runs in the transverse plane. And as blood collects here, it can go down either the straight sinus. The straight sinus here is in blue. Or we can sort of come around the transverse sinus and we can come down the sigmoid sinus. So anything in anatomy that is sigmoid is kind of it kind of makes an S shape, kind of snakes around. So this is our sigmoid sinus right here. And we can see over here on the left side, we have a sigmoid sinus as well. And then these two sinuses that we have one up above and we have one down below. Those are called the petrous sinuses. So this is the superior petrous sinus, and this is the inferior petrous sinus. And all of those eventually are going to run to the jugular vein, which is draining deoxygenated blood off of the brain, taking it back to the heart. So those are the sinuses, and they're all in blue. Now there are a couple structures. There's one structure, I should say, that overlies this straight sinus that might be a little bit difficult to discern from the falx, because another thing that we're looking to identify on this is the falx. The falx is the tissue that separates two hemispheres. So you can imagine that the cerebellum sits in this area here, and there are two hemispheres to the cerebellum. And in between, there's going to be a tissue that kind of comes up between those two hemispheres, and that's called the falx cerebelli. So that's for the cerebellum. And there's a falx cerebri that goes between the two cerebral hemispheres here. And so that is what is being indicated. It's been cut away, certainly, but that is what's being indicated here, the falx cerebri. So falx cerebri in white, falx cerebelli is in white, and it is overlying the blue straight sinus underneath, which is carrying blood. The other important thing that we need to be able to recognize in this model are the 12 cranial nerves. So the first two are pretty easy, and hopefully you've already seen the video that I posted of the 12 cranial nerves. But this is a little bit of a different view of them. The first two are pretty easy, and the first two are the ones that are anterior to the pituitary. This is the pituitary gland or hypophysis right here. So we have the cranial nerve number 1, which is the olfactory nerve, and this is the olfactory tract here where the line ends, and this is the olfactory nerve. And up here at the end, there's what's called the olfactory bulb, and that's kind of where the extensions are going to come through that cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone into the top of the sinus cavity, and that's where the sensory information is going to originate. If we go just behind that, we see we don't have the optic chiasm here. It's been cut away, but we do see the optic nerves. So these are going to be coming to the eyeballs and bringing sensory information into the brain from the eyes. That is cranial nerve number 2, the optic nerve. So next we come back and we look at a group of 3 nerves. These 3 nerves are kind of right in this area here, and depending on which side you look at, we have cut away different amounts of material to be able to see the different nerves, but the nerves are in white. So the next 3 nerves are 3, 4, and 5. Oculomotor is number 3, 4 is trochlear, and number 5 is trigeminal. The oculomotor nerve is this one here. And if we pull that away, and we can see underneath it, and we've also cut away one of the cerebellar arteries here, then we can see the trochlear nerve that's underneath it. So we can only see that here on the left side, and we see the oculomotor nerve here on the right side. So don't let yourself get confused there. And the trigeminal nerve, it's a Mac Daddy. And trigeminal, like trident, it's going to immediately split off into three. So this is the trigeminal nerve, cranial nerve number 5. This is the ganglion for the trigeminal nerve. How is it listed in your lab book? The trigeminal ganglion. And hopefully you remember, a ganglion is a group of cell bodies out in the peripheral nervous system that are bunched together. So cell bodies in the central nervous system are gray matter, but they are ganglia in the peripheral nervous system, and we're outside of the brain here. So that is our trigeminal ganglion. And then we immediately split into our three, right, we're trigeminal, into 3 different nerves here. Our 3 different nerves here are on top. We're going to go to the eyes up here, and that is our ophthalmic nerve. Our second nerve, which is this one right here in the middle, that's our maxillary nerve. That's going to go toward the maxillary bone there at the top of the jaw. And then we have this one that's going to move downward toward the mandible, and that is the mandibular nerve down there. So that is our trigeminal nerve. And now we move to our next group of 3. Our next group of 3 nerves are cranial nerve number 6, 7, and 8. AFV, right? Because we need to take a break and watch America's Funniest Videos. AFV is our next group. We have here, right here, is cranial nerve. Oh, sorry, I need to start up here in the middle. So the abducens nerve is cranial nerve number 6, is right here. And then we move out here, and it looks like we have 3 lines, but really, my guess is what we're seeing here is the vestibular and cochlear nerves separate. And this together would be the vestibulocochlear nerve. So the facial nerve is going to be between the abducens and the vestibulocochlear nerve, and then we have the vestibulocochlear nerve here. Both the facial nerve and the vestibulocochlear nerve, the vestibule and the cochlea are parts of the inner ear. And all of these nerves, these 2 nerves, are traveling through that inner acoustic meatus and coming out through the ear. So they travel close together there. And that brings us to the final 4. Yay, gotta love the final 4. So cranial nerve number 9 is glossopharyngeal. Cranial nerve number 10 is vagus. Cranial nerve number 11 is accessory, and cranial nerve number 12 is hypoglossal. So cranial nerve number 9, we have this group of 3 just right close together here. Cranial nerve number 9, glossopharyngeal. Cranial nerve number 10 is vagus, right? If you get 10 out of 10, you got to go to Vegas. And cranial nerve number 11 here is, sorry, I'm losing my pointer. Number 11 here is the accessory nerve, and that is actually easier to see drawn out here on the right side. Sometimes it's called the spinal accessory nerve, and you can really see how it's reaching toward the spine here on the left-hand side. So that's the accessory nerve, and it is the 3rd one of this grouping. And then we have, yay, finally, number 12, to have our perfect dozen, the hypoglossal nerve. This is going through that hypoglossal canal that you know is right on the side adjacent to the foramen magnum in that occipital bone. And so that's sort of a large nerve that kind of fans out, that hypoglossal nerve. All right, that's it for Smiley. I hope that helps.